Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified. I'm your host, Mark the Liberty, and joining me today is...
Corey can't be trained, not Griner.
Corey, doesn't matter if you're trained or not, Reiner. On today's episode, we'll discuss a research study from UC San Diego on the efficacy of security awareness training on actually stopping phishing. After that, we'll go over some research from one of my favorite researchers, this time discussing quite a few vulnerabilities in employee-only portals for Intel employees. And then we will end with the State of File Security report from the Ponemon Institute. With that, let's go ahead and, file share our way in. That's stupid. Whatever.
Upload.
Yeah, there we go. That's why you make the big bucks.
I hope not, man. Although in this world, with how overpaid certain people are for not really contributing, who knows?
So, Corey, when's the last time you did your cybersecurity awareness training?
I think I did mine a tad bit late, which is a bad admission from a CISO, but we do ours right near the beginning of the year, I think like the fourth month, and I did it right at the end. So let's say a few months ago.
What if I told you that it really didn't matter if you did it or not on impacting your ability to spot a fish?
That would suck. That would suck.
Well,
because I mean, seriously, it would. I think there's a lot of tools that can spot fish technically for you and maybe keep them out of your inbox, but I'm more concerned about spearfish. I actually think even with AI-assisted tools, spearfish get through, and I'm not sure what the technical controls would be. And that's why I train, by the way. That's why I want to at least try to have training to get user behavior better. But give me your freaking bad news. This is the 443 Security Simplified. I think we're used to the world burning when it comes to cybersecurity. We might as well continue.
And unfortunately, there's a research study from UC San Diego that they just published a week ago that seems to indicate that security awareness training has basically no effect on stopping people from clicking fishes or not.
Oh,
so
lovely.
This was
good news.
8-month. Yeah.
Happy. What is this? Monday or Tuesday, everyone, whenever you get this.
Yep. So it was an 8-month-long study that involved 20,000 employees of UC San Diego, mostly across like the California health system. And it involved 10 simulated phishing campaigns and like a series of training and control groups that got different types of training or no training at all, designed to see if like the traditional annual training actually enhanced employees' ability to identify and avoid phishing. And long story short, the findings were basically no. It made no significant difference in failure rates for employees. But once you get into the weeds, you can kind of see why that might have been the case. And I think maybe still some strategies to help.
By the way, I pretended I didn't know what we were talking about, but I have one theory I didn't see mentioned here either that I will bring up too.
Awesome. So they did the study starting with the traditional annual security training for some employees, no training for others, then started simulated phishing attacks against them. They then tried additional types of training, either like in-depth Q&A sessions or detailed briefings with folks to see if it made a difference. But basically, they found that employees who completed any form of training performed only marginally better than those who received none. And by marginally, it was a 1.7% increase. They blamed it on a few things like materials being too generic or poorly designed. They noted a couple interesting stats. So most employees spent less than a minute engaging with the material in more than 3/4 of cases. And in 37 to 51% of sessions, the employees just immediately closed out the training window.
So I'm curious about this because, I mean, I'll get to our theories later and why I actually think we have some quantifiable data that says this may be true once you start your training long run, but I think there's an initial bump, but we'll talk about that later. But our training, like, there's all kinds of different training platforms out there. And ours, if you close the window, I mean, one way an employee can ignore it is start a video and have the video playing on their computer and just not watch. But if you don't finish the video, it's not, if you close it in 1 minute and it's a 25-minute video, it's not going to pass you. And I think later on you're going to talk about Q&A. The other thing most good platforms do is they nowadays, rather than just being one long video and make sure you watch it, they'll pause with questions in between. They'll make you next. So I find it. I wish we knew. Just so you know, you mentioned the study. We're getting a lot of our data from an article. The actual study is gated, so you actually have to pay for it or be part of the university. So it's hard to know. I would love to hear the details of what platform they used, because I think most platforms wouldn't let you close out the training after a minute. Most of the platforms are going to force you to go through Q&A and interact in order to give you credit for the training. So I find some of that a little suspicious.
That's one of my takeaways from this was it doesn't seem to be a study on the effectiveness of training, like if it is assigned and actually managed. It's more of like if your training is only you make it available to them and tell them they should do it, but there's no follow up, then
Yes,
yeah,
if
it's
they
not
don't do
effective.
it. Yeah, yeah. If you're closing it in a minute, you're not getting the training.
Yeah. Because like you mentioned, in some of the cases, they did some more in-depth training. Like one of them, they had an interactive Q&A session after a phishing simulation to like go over the attack and try and teach them to be like more or less susceptible to it. They found that the employees that did complete that actually had a 9% less likely to fail the next phishing test. But they also found that so few people participated just en masse, the actual impact was negligible. So my takeaway was, yeah, when people do participate, it makes a meaningful difference. But if you're not enforcing it and it's just an optional thing, of course, it literally does nothing. Everyone's going to click out of it.
Yeah, I agree. I would. I need to be able to actually read the study to see if this was legit, because most platforms make the employees at least have the video and answer questions. And if you're not doing that, are you really training at all? I mean, even if the platform lets you skip the video, if you at least have Q&A, they have to get that right. The other thing I was going to mention is these trainings are now standard enough that organizations have been doing them for years. And the platforms we use, I'm not going to buzz market, but we use a very popular platform that everyone knows of. They're well known for cybersecurity training, but they show you how, I mean, besides the training, they send simulated phishing emails. So we know our click rate. We know how often we can trick our users despite having the training. And when we first instituted this product and started training, we had a much higher click rate on our simulated phishing. And one of my theories is, well, one, we're a security company, so I think we have awareness that's a little higher than standard. But the first year you institute this, we had a high click rate, and we immediately started to see that click rate go down. Since then, I see no real difference. Like, we've run this for probably over a decade now, at least a decade, and the click rate is very low, but it's consistent. Like, the training, is it having any additional new impact? Maybe like we have a trickle of new employees and leaving employees every year, so like they might be new to it, but overall the majority of our employees have had this training for multiple years. So if you just look from one year to the other, you're not really going to see a change in their behavior that much. And honestly, when you look at updated phishing training a year, there are some new tactics that they have to warn about, like QR codes and AI deepfakes, but it doesn't change much. So one of my things is, have they been training at this school or wherever they did the test for 5 years already? Well, guess what? They already got their efficacy changed the first year. And the amount of change you see after that, I guess if it's a student body changing regularly, maybe, but I feel like unless you're going to a place that have never done training before, you're not going to see the true efficacy change.
That is a totally fair, mildly warm take on that one. I think that totally makes
Yeah.
sense.
I
Like,
will say the one thing I guess I'm against like it being completely ineffective. If you actually teach a person something, you don't just let them skip a video, but you force them to teach, learn, and take a quiz. I believe it has an effect. But the one thing I will say is, no matter how much effect it has, there are still tricks in social engineering that is really hard to spot even with the training, and we still get a consistent click rate. It's low. We're below industry average for how many people fall for some of the simulated phishing emails, but there's always one that will either be sophisticated enough or get the user at the time. So I do, and I think it's going to get worse with AI-based spear phishing, making it even better. So I don't think you should rest your laurels on training for sure. I'm just not so sure that it has zero effect.
Now,
I would question their study a little.
I want to challenge your theory that it'll get worse with AI based spear phishing because we're also moving towards replacing all humans with AI. And how do you
Mm-hmm.
social engineer people that aren't humans? Maybe we'll solve the problem by removing the weak link from
I,
the problem.
I think what you're saying is something I agree with. The best system to try to catch some of the really sophisticated human tricks is another AI system. The other AI system may not even be looking for the scam, but may be looking for signs of AI usage in the email. But like, without me thinking about the deep technical details of how this works, we're going to start to see AI usage in marketing emails and other emails too. So uh, how is it going to tell the difference between a legit usage of AI in an email versus social engineering? I guess it can look at documents and other things. Either way, I agree with your point. The best defense for these new AI increases in spear phishing is AI protection. But I think that will still get to a cat and mouse game where there's always going to be a back and forth. AI security gets a little better. AI attackers do some adversarial AI learning and find something new to get past it, and it goes back and forth and back and forth.
I agree. And yeah, as interesting as the potential output of the study was, I think we're definitely on the right track that security awareness training is not totally useless. It has its
It,
place. It
if
has
you're
its
not going to
limits.
enforce people actually do the training, if you're going to let people close a window after 1 minute and still pass, then it is useless. I think
Yes.
everyone can agree with that. But you need to get a system that makes people take the training and makes people take a quiz. And I think
Yep.
they've improved that with the Q&A. The Q&A is essentially the quiz.
Yep.
A Q&A, you get 19%. That's a good increase.
And when it comes to like actually effective training, though, like I found internally at WatchGuard, the ones that do get the most engagement are the ones that are more personable for us. Like,
Yeah.
yes, we have a platform where we assign out the canned training sessions like early in the year, but throughout the year when we do
We'll
like
add a video
ongoing like
ourselves.
webinars
Yeah.
or something, or like your custom made modules for that annual training too, like those are the ones that actually get people interested because we can
Yeah.
tailor them specifically towards like us, our own systems, our own risk profile, and it makes it more interesting than the hey, have you ever heard of a
I
fish
agree.
before training.
I would like to even see, like, there are little up. I see very little updating in the phishing training. It's usually a lot of the same tips, and what I worry about is fatigue. Like, especially when you get people that are pretty good at cybersecurity. So I would like to see training when they have the canned videos, rather than forcing everyone to do the canned video. They start with the Q&A test. They take all the old tips from last year and they just give somebody a rigorous answer to these questions. And if someone answers them all right really quickly, they don't need to watch the 15-minute video that repeats the old tips. And then you show them like a 2-minute video that says, oh, here's some new things in phishing training I want you to be aware of: QR codes, blah, 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 AI, blah, blah, blah. Then a small test for that. But I think some of the things I don't like about training is how each canned video each year, while they update it, anyone that's in security, it's mostly the same with only maybe 5 to 10% change. Let's not waste people's time if it's mostly the same. Let's go straight to what we really want to know is if they know the behaviors they should be doing. And if they can pass the quiz without doing the video, they at least know the behaviors they should be doing, and you save them time. And because otherwise, the reason people close things is either they're just not interested, and that's why you shouldn't let them close the video, but it's also because they already know the stuff. Don't waste people's time on stuff they know. Maybe do the Q&A first and then get past that quickly. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
one thing I think we all can agree on is security awareness training probably needs improvement. What's the way to get people to pay attention to it, but also not waste their time on stuff you have to repeat every year? I will say one other topic before we move to the next story is
Mhm.
this has not spread to the compliance industry. Like every compliance I know of, whether it's PCI, ISO 2701, SOC 2, insurance companies require this annually. So until these type of security frameworks or these security regulations or these people like insurers that can push practices on people to insure them, until they change their mind, you have to do this anyways.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And it, like, I mean, this isn't the only place where it feels like some of those standards or the compliance areas are behind the times. Like, it took forever for even PCI to
Passwords.
update. Yeah, like password
Yeah.
rotation requirements.
If you have
We realized that's
MFA,
stupid.
what's the point? Yeah, we still have to talk to people that, hey, both NIST and Microsoft was one of the first to mention it, and then
Yep.
NIST accepts MFA now. But yeah, you're right. I still to this day, security experts will be like, why are you not rotating your passwords? Come on, keep up with the times.
Yeah, 100%.
We are rotating the passwords if there's no MFA or if they're service accounts, but it's different with MFA.
Yep. So, anyways, moving on then, second story I wanted to talk about. So, back last December, we actually discussed some research from a researcher named Eaton when they found a bunch of vulnerabilities in McDonald's website for in a region in India that basically let them order food for pennies and even steal other people's orders.
I
Well,
remember that one.
they just published a new blog post, and I absolutely love this dude's. I assume it's a dude. Maybe I shouldn't assume it's a dude. This person's research. And this last one is called Intel Outside Hacking Every Intel Employee and Various Internal Websites. And it's basically they found a bunch of vulnerabilities in internal or at least employee only web applications for Intel that let them download the information of 270,000 Intel employees worldwide.
Oops.
Um, yeah. So they walk through four separate web applications that are for employee use only but exposed to the internet and just basic vulnerability research in them. And the first one, for example, it was a website to let employees order business cards, specifically employees in the Intel India operations team. It's a basic like Angular JavaScript application that uses Microsoft Authentication Library for JavaScript or MSAL, so pretty boilerplate. But so they were going in, digging into the details in the source code. They found first off that they could trick the app into thinking they're logged in just by modifying one function called get all accounts to return a non-zero value. That gave them access to the application itself, like the web front end, but that shouldn't give you access to any of the data used to fill out the application. That all should be like authenticated API requests, where if you didn't actually log in, you wouldn't have an authentication token to send to that API to get all the data. But you may be able to see where this is going. So this app included an API to let employees look up their info out of the employee database to fill out that business card. And then that lookup API was authenticated, but the researcher noticed that it was working when they bypassed that authentication to gain access to the app. Because it turns out there's a separate API to get the access token, and that API was unauthenticated and runs automatically once you load up a certain page. So they had a unauthenticated way to get a authentication token, and then they could use that to then query this user employee database. They were basically able to grab just shy of a gigabyte worth of data from every single Intel employee worldwide.
It took them
It
a while to
included,
get that too. It was so much data. Like it, the point was, even when you were looking up one user, it kept on giving a huge amount of data. It sounded like Mark, and he had
yeah,
different tools. He finally had to go to TextLine curl to realize the 1 gigabyte JSON file that it returned every time is literally the full employee database every time. It's,
yep.
what the heck?
They were using popular tools like Fiddler and Postman and stuff, and all of them were just
Uh,
breaking trying to handle this file. It was nuts. They gave an example of the contents of the file. It looked like it was a like a dump of the Active Directory from Intel. So it included job information, names, phone numbers, employee IDs, things like that.
Good
I
news
think
is
in the
it wasn't social security numbers and pay. It at least didn't have that, but I do think it
correct,
had personal addresses.
yeah.
And you can
So
kind of
still,
see the schema of the file and everything that would have been in it if you're watching the
personal
video version
addresses
of
and
this
like
podcast.
job titles for every employee, department, who they work for. Like this would be a social engineering gold mine in the hands of someone else with looser morals. So that was the
Yep.
first application. The second one was an app called Hierarchy Management. Looks like it's a like project management tool that Intel uses. It requires authentication, and it's got an OAuth flow using a username and password, which theoretically the researcher would need to know a valid username and password to log in. Turns out that the app has the password encrypted in the source code. And because it's client side, in order for the app to be able to use that password, it needs the decryption key locally too.
Everything has to be there.
Yep.
You've kind of showed this completely different attack, but I think when you were showing, what am I thinking of? How someone that already had access to a computer could start getting passwords. It's like the Chrome, your local Chrome might try to keep its plain text password out of memory, but it has to have, the data files and the encryption keys to decrypt it locally. So once you have that client side access, it's pretty much game over for a smart person.
Yep. Exactly. Better yet, the password, like the actual encryption key that they used to encrypt this, was literally just the numbers 0 through 9, followed by the letters A through F. It was not a great encryption key for encrypting this client side data. They
Not
also
random.
found, yeah, hard coded credentials and an authentication header as well too. One of them
I
was
think
for a Q.
his comedy needs a rim shot, but dump bump when he says encryption is as easy as 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. One of
Anyways,
the hard coded credentials was a QA super user. The password was IN7EL at 1234G. When you say the comedy, like his little quip for this one was, when you're thinking of security, just do whatever Intel doesn't.
it does do the op. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, they were able to modify the client side source code to like hard code certain values of the admin users to give them access to the app. Funny enough, when you like load up the application, it says, "Welcome, admin. Please ensure you're connected to the Intel network or VPN before using this application." But all the data is there. They're able to bypass authentication and once again retrieve that list of not just only employees, but like lists of projects. It seems like these cross departmental teams are working on too. So some pretty potentially important information in there also. They're not done yet. So the third one that they went into was a product onboarding site. Looks like it's used to upload products to Intel Arc, which is like their main product repository of like documentation and spec sheets and stuff. This one they said was like the worst offender for hard coded credentials. There were hard coded OAuth credentials in the JavaScript files, usernames and passwords just in the comments. They found 3 more hard coded basic auth headers in the script. There was a hard coded GitHub personal access token that gave them access to an internal repository. They said they didn't test this one because they suspected it would have let them publish like a product to Intel Arc and they didn't want to risk breaking something. But once they did get access, like most of the critical functions were at least gated behind like VPN access or local network access, but they could still retrieve some info, including information about employees in this one too. And then finally, the fourth app was for Intel's, it's a supplier site for their environmental health and safety. They found they could bypass authentication by so one of the websites that you call out when you normally like log into it returns back a like a token that says not authorized. There's no H in it. There's actually a misspelling in it, and the app checks to make sure that the token does not say not authorized before granting you access. So they found if they just modified that token, they could get into the application. They had to find an employee ID to keep moving forward, but they managed to find one for a disabled user account. Even though it was disabled, that ID still let them in. And it eventually gave them access to an API that returned a bunch of employee info too. There were a few different steps they had, a few more steps they had to go through to bypass different authorization checks, but just through client side access, they were able to get in there. So long story short, like these obviously aren't, critical applications for Intel, but getting access to 270,000 employees worth of data is still a decently large deal.
It's a
And
bad data leak, and it's as far as phishing. And what would come next is maybe targeted, besides potentially identity theft, targeted phishing that might help actual breach.
exactly.
And they could use these sites if I were to if I wanted to call an employee to get them to do something, and I wanted to act like an Intel. I mean, Intel is huge, right? Tens of thousands of employees. I would act like an IT guy, and having all this knowledge of these inside sites, including being able to look up the employee's information and spit it back to them, is a good way to build trust that you really are part of Intel IT.
Yeah. They did report them to Intel's bug bounty program. They noted that like most of these are out of scope for the bug bounty program.
That is
But
kind
they
of
did at least
weird
acknowledge it.
that I like one. I don't consider these leak credentials. I consider, I mean, some of them are hard coded passwords, and so I feel like the credentials thing he mentions here, where usernames, passwords, account identifiers, all of that is out of scope. Well, if you have vulnerabilities that leak that, those are pretty huge. Why is that out of scope? It's not really
They
the credential; it's the bad design and the web application issues.
It's more their infrastructure itself. So like these websites that are operated by them, they're saying that's not in scope. Which,
That is intelgotcha.com. So leave our websites alone.
yep. But I mean, 270,000 employees worth of info, you would have thought they'd get at least something out of that. Like, I know even us, if that was technically out of scope, like this is a good finding.
We would have
And we
given
would,
them something. Yeah.
yep,
Apparently, they have included, they being Intel, have expanded their bug bounty program to include some stuff. So that is
good.
good.
After they already found and fixed the issues. Very kind of them. But yeah, more great research from researcher Eaton there. And I will continue following their blog for the next hilarious findings they have.
These hard coded credits, it feels very much like Web Application 101. It makes me think of how developer, like I've heard, maybe it's just in the security community, but our own engineers say, why are you even talking about SQL injection and cross-site scripting and hard-coded credentials? Those are simple things that should be fixed. I'm like, no, people are still making, yes, they were discovered 30 years ago, probably when people were making text-based websites, but people are still making the same mistakes. It's
Yep.
not fixed. It's
It's
human error. Not knowing the technical problem. It's humans are still making the same mistakes, not being aware enough of web application flaws, or just too lazy and think no one's going to look for a hard coded password somewhere.
hey, job security for all the bug bounty hunters out there. That's for sure, though.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Unless it's this case where they didn't actually get paid for it. But hey, they got a cool research post out of it. Either way, moving on to the last story. So I stumbled across last week our friends at the Ponemon Institute, in partnership or at least in sponsorship with OpSWAT, published a new research paper which they called "The State of File Security." Which I think it was last episode or 2 episodes ago, we talked about the Ponemon Institute's cost of a breach report that they published recently again this year.
Yep.
And so I always find their reports interesting. This one seems like more of a survey of like how organizations feel and are handling file security, but there were still some
Yeah,
kind of
very much
interesting
so.
findings in it. And like, I guess just walking through some of the key findings, the first one that they highlighted was just they asked organizations like what risks are they worried about when it comes to file security, and gave them a few different categories. And the number one category, with 45% of respondents calling it a risk, was malicious or negligent insiders. Basically, an employee intentionally leaking data or an employee making a mistake.
And this
and
is
leaking
this is
data.
specifically about files. Like if you're
Yeah.
worried about losing sensitive information based on files, it's an employee puts it in the wrong place. An employee accidentally uploads it to the wrong customer. Yeah. So yes, when it comes to file security, it's usually negligent or malicious insiders.
An employee submits it to ChatGPT to look for bugs, something like
Exactly.
that. Some of the other ones that were pretty high risks in there were file access visibility and control. So presumably the lack of file access visibility
That's
and
what I would
control.
think. I think they have more details down below, but this is a like DLP is something when it comes to file level DLP, I don't think there's any perfect solution for. And I think even some of the bigger companies out there trying to really fully control file access, DLP, any sort of DLP, where files can go once a user has access to it, is a very complex, expensive solution that takes a lot of work and increases, does a lot of friction. So I feel like a lot of people are, they might have simple DLP. Maybe they put criticality in Microsoft files, and then Microsoft will always try to impose some of that. But the second someone downloads the file for offline viewing and moves it to Dropbox or something, then you're outside of that and you might have to have another control. So to me, as a CISO, and maybe you, someone that works for, is the director of our security operations, tracking files and really having visibility of how users are moving them, even down to USB keys and stuff, is a solution you have to throw tons of money at, tons of frictiony controls at, and you still will never have a perfect solution. People can still
Yeah.
screenshot.
It's
So
definitely
I agree with it being the second.
yeah,
Right.
it's easier with like cloud hosted services. Like we actually have pretty good visibility into like SharePoint and OneDrive types of files, including like auditing capabilities. But like you said,
But
the
once that
taking a
file is
screenshot,
downloaded, though, I mean, we
correct,
allow people to download, and there's nothing wrong with, say, Mark downloading a local copy of a Word document. Once it's downloaded, if you do have the permission, there's
way
no
more
control
difficult than
thereafter. Yeah.
yep. Um, let's see other findings they had. So only 39% of respondents were confident that the files are secured when transferring to and from third parties. Basically, when you're sharing files with someone else, like how confident are you that they're not abusing their access, or like what the sharing link you're using isn't overly generous in there. Another one that was interesting, 52% of respondents primarily measure file management practices by how productive IT security employees are. This one was interesting because when you look at like drilling down a bit further, they said only 49% actually use metrics that include assessing the security of sensitive and confidential data and files. So it feels like my takeaway from this is they're not good metrics tracking for organizations on file security. If they're just saying like security operations is being productive and not they're actually managing stuff.
I also think it has to do with what I'm talking about is the controls you could put on DLP and file access to lock it down better usually add a lot of friction that makes people less productive. So I wonder if it has anything to do with, you do need some security on this, but you can't kill the productivity of those folks. I don't know.
Yeah. They had a whole section, a couple sections on artificial intelligence too. So 33% of organizations said they're making AI part of their file security strategy, and 29% said they plan to add AI in 2026. So a bit over half by the end of next year will be using AI for file security, which makes sense. Like you just pointed out a bit ago, like when you're a large organization with hundreds of thousands of files everywhere, that's impossible for a human to look through. And now you can have automated tools to help flag stuff, but even then you could potentially have thousands of like things you're looking at, and having AI help distill that down. I could see that being a good use case. But so was it what, a month ago when we talked about the cost of a breach report, a couple weeks ago? There was a whole section on like AI governance in there. There was another poll in here too, where they found only 25% of organizations have a formal generative AI policy, which feels exceptionally low.
I'm happy to say well, I guess we haven't made our final policy. We at least have our generative AI guidelines. So we probably fall in that, or maybe it's an ad hoc approach. But yeah, I was surprised by the 29% is banning generative AI. I understand if you have no policy, that might be the only thing you can do, but I think that's going to ruin business innovation. I think that might actually harm your security long run. And more importantly, when it comes to productivity and tools, we know people skip security when it messes with their job. Like if you cause friction and people are like, people want to do the right thing. They want to try to be secure. But if you're doing something that literally makes their job harder, uh, they're going to go right past it. And then you think it's banned, and yet they're using it behind your back. So I'm not sure I would ban generative AI personally, because I still think is as much as you and I know and are, I wouldn't say afraid, are very cognizant and aware of the risks and know that they're actually large. I think using it gives you a better understanding so that you can start to understand what safeguards you need to put into place. Using it is what might lead you to figuring out what your policy should be. But yeah, it sounds like, 30 people, almost 30% just say, no, you can't do this. I'm curious how long they'll be lasting with that.
Definitely feels like taking the opposite extreme end for handling artificial
Yeah.
intelligence, where, like you said, if you're not at least like exploring opportunities in it, you will potentially get left behind by the competitors that are using it. When it comes to like securing your AI deployments with regards to corporate files and like how they might interact with them, 41% of organizations were going to use prompt security tools. 38% were going to just mask sensitive information. And another category they have is just AI guardrails. So like things you can put on the model itself. And there was 35%. That one. So my concern with that is we found time and time again, it is trivial to jailbreak an AI model if you are
What
motivated
about if
enough.
you're using the prompt security? I agree. I absolutely agree
Yep.
with getting past guardrails as a possibility until the AI, platforms and tools improve on their own. But if you combine that with prompt security tools, it's usually it's some sort of prompt injection that will get past the AI guidelines. And while this is going to be a cat and mouse game for decades, I think there's a lot of tricks to find. I feel that if you use a combination of AI guardrails with prompt security tools, that might at least have a chance to prevent certain injection. You have a higher percentage of them not being able to get past the guardrails. Never 100% chance, maybe not even close to 70, but 50% is better than 25%.
Yep. I agree. I don't know, Corey, were there any other ones that stood out to you in here? Like there was a few interesting things on like what folks are using to protect against like file
Yeah.
security. Like,
I'll just say it comes a lot. There, like sandboxing is one of my favorites when we talk about behavioral analysis. Making sure a file, like a document. One of the things that meant, like, if you talk about the worries people have of files, I can't find it right now, but I believe it was, oh, here we go, macro based issues with Office documents in 0 days. So people are worried about booby trap documents, which is good. And I think you and I have talked so much about sandboxing, which is great. But a term that I see popping up in the security industry, just another acronym that some people may know, is something called content disarm and reconstruction, CDR. I think of it like a PDF or a Word document where they literally take a PDF and they break it down to what's the actual body and image. Like, as we know, a PDF isn't just text and images. It can have links, it can have code, it can have scripts. It has its own whole formatting. So I think CDR tools are used to take a PDF and basically make sure all the body and images are intact, but take all the places where malicious actors can add malicious elements and just kind of null those out in some way before reconstructing the document into just the basic body and images without all the extraneous extra data that could just be normal metadata or document formatting, but also could be malicious scripts. So I noticed that was something they mentioned. I don't know if a lot of people have those tools yet. They're kind of newer, although they've been around for a while. So I found the CDR stuff interesting. I still like sandboxing a lot. What about you on the protections? Do you have something you were?
the sandboxing one makes sense.
Yeah,
Um, I like that. Like I liked a few of the other tools they mentioned, like neutering hyperlinks as well too. Seems like a
yeah,
very common form of phishing these days within
The
malicious document.
reality, yeah, the reality is the multi-scan. They talked about multi-scanning. To me, every one of these techniques should be part of your kind of, whether it's
Yeah.
anti-malware or document check. It should be checking hyperlinks, doing sandboxing. All of these should, or at least the majority, should be present in any sort of EDR or EPP product that is looking at documents. And I would say that's probably the case. That doesn't mean they always can detect every single malicious hyperlink, but they're certainly looking for some. So yeah, the takeaway is you really should be doing all of it by getting a product that has multiple layers of document malware detection.
Hey, Corey, what kind of products have that?
Huh. Thank you for pitching the WatchGuard EPDR. This podcast is brought to you by WatchGuard's Advanced Endpoint Prevention,
Oh my
Detection
God.
and Response.
Yep, perfect. Either way, interesting study from Ponemon Institute. There was actually a huge number of respondents to it. It was like 20 or 18,000 people or so.
Yeah.
At least the folks that they requested responses from. Looking at it, it's actually around 7,000 actually returned it, or 700 returned it. So smaller pool, but
I
um,
think these, like you say, whenever it's a survey where it's really these experts and these kind of security people at IT organizations answering to their best of their ability, it is really a gut check. So it's not necessarily quantitative as in what's happening out there as far as attacks. But I still think, even though maybe quantifiable attack studies are a little higher as far as good research, I still think these surveys really matter, and you get an idea of what IT people are worried about. And even if they're anecdotal, it's based on the things they have been suffering for real.
yep, I'm with you on that. Cool stuff. What do you think the next Ponemon Institute study is going to be?
Huh. I don't know.
The
The
state of
ROI, like the state of AI security.
that could be a big one.
Who's winning? I want to know if the benefit of AI security is higher than the risk of AI threats. So
Ooh,
I definitely, guys, I think I think at the end of the day, hopefully they'll balance out and maybe the good guys will win in the end. But right now, what is the AI, state of AI security? Does it offer more risk or more reward
let's
from a security perspective?
yeah, let's go get that one funded.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future. I don't know. Anthropic, can you help us out? That sounds like a good study.
They're going to ask us for money. I would love to be part of that study, but I don't know if we'll have to see if marketing can give us some money.
Let's see. Please, pretty please, with all that advertising revenue we bring in with this podcast. Wait a minute.
We'll have to quantify that.
Yes. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe, or Corey and I both get fired. If you have any questions for today's topics or suggestions for future episode topics, you can reach out to us on Blue Sky. I'm at itsmark.me, Corey's at SecAdept. And the both of us are on Instagram at watchguard_technologies. Thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us next week.